It was a night that would be burned into Lucia's memory forever, though not for any reason she could have anticipated. She'd always thought that life-changing moments would come with a loud bang or a blinding flash, something unmistakable. But instead, it came with the quiet hum of the city, the weight of her purse on her shoulder, and the persistent ache in her chest that had been growing for months. Lucia had just left Marco. She had kissed him goodbye, his lips brushing hers as lightly as the passing of a breeze, both knowing that it was likely the last time. The unspoken words hung between them in the heavy night air, a mix of regret, longing, and resignation. She had given everything to that relationship. It was supposed to be the kind of love that saved her from herself, from the spiraling self-doubt, from the loneliness that had defined so much of her 20s. But Marco, despite all his promises, had never really been able to hold her up. His love was full of gaps, spaces where his ambition, his guilt, and his fear of commitment seeped in, poisoning what they had built together. And now, as Lucia walked home through the cobblestone streets of Florence, her world was unraveling. The city, which had once felt like a place of hope and endless possibility, now seemed claustrophobic, the centuries-old buildings leaning in on her, suffocating her with their quiet judgment. Lucia's life had not always been like this. She had grown up in a small town in southern Italy, surrounded by a large family, where love was loud and constant, but so were the expectations. Her parents had worked tirelessly, not for themselves, but for Lucia and her brother, Alessandro. They wanted their children to have everything they hadn't, a chance to escape the simplicity of rural life, a shot at something bigger. But with those hopes came a weight that Lucia often found unbearable. She had been a dreamer, always with her head in a book or painting by the river, lost in her thoughts. But as she grew older, that world of art and imagination was replaced by the practicality her parents demanded. She was pushed toward a degree in law, something stable and respected. For a while she followed the path set before her, trying to meet their expectations. But as the years passed, Lucia felt a growing dissatisfaction, a sense of being lost in a life that wasn't hers. It was around that time she met Marco. He was charming in a way that disarmed her. His presence was magnetic, and he spoke of things that made her feel alive, of adventure, of leaving the ordinary behind, of building a life not bound by convention. For the first time, Lucia felt that someone understood the restless energy that lived inside her. They fell in love quickly, their connection a whirlwind of passion and dreams. But love, as Lucia soon realized, wasn't enough to keep the cracks from forming. Marco had his own demons. He was ambitious, always chasing success, always needing more. Lucia, on the other hand, was searching for peace, for a sense of belonging. Slowly, they began to pull in different directions, and the once intoxicating bond between them turned sour, filled with arguments, silences, and the growing realization that they were no longer enough for each other. The night Lucia left Marco, she made a decision. It wasn't just about ending a relationship, it was about reclaiming herself. For so long, she had been shaped by the people around her, her parents, her brother, Marco. She had lost herself in the process, becoming someone she no longer recognized. It was time to change that, to rediscover the person she had buried deep beneath all the expectations and disappointments. The months that followed were filled with silence. Not the comforting kind, but the type that echoed with self-doubt. She found herself questioning everything: her career, her choices, her worth. Every morning felt like a battle to get out of bed, to face the world that seemed so indifferent to her pain. She began seeing a therapist, something she had never imagined herself doing, but it became her lifeline. In those sessions, she started to unravel years of internalized pressure, the need for perfection, the fear of failure. Slowly, Lucia started to rebuild her life. She quit her law job, a decision that sent her parents into a frenzy. "What will you do? How will you live?" her mother had asked, panic etched in every word. But Lucia didn't have answers. All she knew was that she couldn't keep living a life that wasn't hers. She turned to painting again. something she hadn't done since she was a teenager. At first, it was just to fill the empty hours, but soon it became something more. It became her escape, her way of processing the chaos inside her. Through art, she found a voice that had been silenced for too long. One afternoon, as she was walking through a gallery in the heart of Florence, she met Valerio. He was the curator, a man with a quiet intensity that intrigued her. Valerio was older, in his mid-40s, with salt and pepper hair and the kind of eyes that seemed to see right through her. They began talking about the exhibit, but their conversation quickly shifted to more personal matters. He asked her about her work, her life, and for the first time in months, Lucia felt seen. Valerio wasn't like Marco. He didn't fill the space with grand gestures or promises. He was patient, thoughtful, and grounded in a way that steadied Lucia. Their relationship blossomed slowly, a contrast to the whirlwind romance she had experienced with Marco. With Valerio, there were no illusions. They were both scarred by life, both carrying their own disappointments and regrets. But in that shared vulnerability, they found something real. For a while, it seemed like everything was falling into place. Lucia's art began gaining recognition, and she was even offered a solo exhibition at the gallery. Her relationship with Valerio deepened, and for the first time in years, she felt a sense of contentment. But life, as she had learned, was rarely so simple. One evening, while going through some old files on Valerio's desk, Lucia came across a letter that shattered the fragile peace she had built. It was from a woman named Sophia, and the words were filled with longing and intimacy. Lucia's heart pounded as she read the lines, piecing together the truth that Valerio had been hiding. When she confronted him, Valerio didn't deny it. He told her about Sophia, a woman from his past who had never quite left his heart. The affair had ended long ago, but the emotional ties remained. Lucia was devastated. She had opened herself up to Valerio in a way she hadn't with anyone else, and now, once again, she was faced with betrayal. In the days that followed, Lucia found herself spiraling. She questioned her judgment, wondering why she seemed destined to repeat the same painful patterns. But this time, something was different. This time, Lucia didn't collapse under the weight of the betrayal. Instead, she confronted it head-on. She talked to Valerio, not with anger, but with a quiet resolve. She wasn't going to let this define her, wasn't going to let someone else's mistakes derail the progress she had made. She ended the relationship, not out of bitterness, but because she knew it wasn't right for her anymore. And though it hurt, she walked away with a sense of clarity she hadn't had before. The years that followed were filled with highs and lows, but Lucia had learned something invaluable. Life wasn't about avoiding pain, but about learning how to live through it. Her art flourished, and she began teaching painting classes to children, something that brought her unexpected joy. She traveled, not to escape her life, but to embrace it, exploring new places and new parts of herself. Lucia never stopped loving, but she learned to love differently, not with the desperate need to be saved, but with the quiet confidence of someone who knew her worth. In the end, Lucia's life wasn't defined by the heartbreaks or the setbacks. It was defined by the way she kept moving forward, by the small victories that came from knowing herself better with each passing day. And as she stood in front of a painting at her latest exhibition, surrounded by friends, family, and strangers who had come to see her work, she realized something. She wasn't lost anymore.